Hi, we've made it to the final part of the IGCSE Computer Science pre-release. This is the May 2018 paper 2, and today we're going to have a look at task 3, which is all about an end of day summary for the shopkeeper. So, task 3 is not too bad. We've basically got 3 things we need to do. We've got to show a summary of how many orders have been made. We've got to come up with the total number of each component sold, and we've got to add up the value of all the orders in that day. So if you've watched the previous video, we made a loop which ended here, where basically we gave the user a chance to answer this question: do they want to make another order or not? And if the answer is no, or n, or nope, or whatever, then it's going to stop by setting this flag or this variable here to false. So assuming that's happened, we're going to take that as the end of the day, as the question puts it in task 3. So the shopkeeper wants to take stock of what's happened. The first thing is to find the number of orders made. So to get that, all I did was a couple of new variables up at the top here. So I've declared these variables, number of orders, and I've assigned them a value of 0 here. It will come to the other one in a minute. So that's just going to be a counter to keep track of how many orders have been made. And further down towards the bottom here, I just incremented that, added 1 to it. So number of orders becomes equal to number of orders plus 1. So each time a customer makes an order, I'm adding 1, just like a counter in a loop. And then I've printed that out. Okay, number of orders today, comma, num orders. So that first stage is pretty easy going. Second one's a bit more tricky. So this is where we're asked for the number of each component sold today. Now, if you remember back at the start, we had where are we here? A stock level where we just made up some random values for how many P3s and P5s there were, and so on. So there's a few ways you could do this. One way would be to have a variable for each one that stored how many there were. So we could have like a P3 variable and a P5 variable, and we could use those to keep track of how many have been sold. So each time a P3 is sold, I could add 1 to that variable. I just think that'll get a bit messy, really, and a bit more of an effort. So I decided not to do it that way. What I've done is literally copied and pasted this line of code, and I've renamed one of them to original stock level. So I'm not going to change these values. That's going to be like what it is at the start of the day. These values are going to get changed just as they have been all the way through in the code. So if somebody buys a P3, that 12 goes down to 11. And then at the end, I can just simply subtract this number from that number to see how many of each have been sold. Okay, so no other changes in the main loop. It's just that we've set up this new list called original stock level. So back down the bottom here, I've got a little for loop. Again, on first appearance it looks pretty horrible, but I'll break that down and we'll understand what it does. So Python's way of doing a for loop is for, and then we have this thing here as a temporary variable just for this loop. So index is what I'm going to use to look at the positions within the list. Okay, and then we go in range, and then I think it's best for IGCSE to always put in the 3 values that you can have in the for loop. I don't necessarily need this one here and this one here, but it helps our understanding to see it. So that is a starting value. So index is going to start, oh, that's a mistake actually, it should start at 0, shouldn't it, in my list. So it should start at 0. It should go up to the length of the list. I could pick any of my lists because they're all the same length. So len brackets with the name of a list will find the length of that list. And then this number here is the increment, like how much to go up by. So I want to move along 1 by 1. So that sets our loop going. And then inside our for loop, I thought it'd be good to print first of all the component name. So remember, index is that variable here that starts at 0, goes up in 1s until it gets to the length of the list. So in this case it's going to that'll be 0, and this section here is going to find me P3 because that is the item at index 0 of my component names list. Just was back up there. Remember here we had component names, so item 0 is P3 as a string. Item 0 will also give me this position and this position in the list. So that's the rest of it here. I've looked in the original start level at position index, and I've subtracted the version of that list that's getting updated each time. One more thing, that this is very just to do with how Python does things. I thought it'd be good to have all of those printing on the same line, so I've added this thing end equals. Now anything I put in those quote marks excuse me, is what Python will put at the end of the line. So by default that will be a new line, so every time we do a print statement it starts a new line in the shell window. I'm kind of overriding that and telling it, rather than doing a new line, just put comma space at the end of each thing. So all of these should print out on one long line. Okay, so we'll try that out in a minute. And last of all, we are asked to find the value of the orders. A little bit vague how that's worded. I assume what it means is the total of all the money we've got coming in from after today's orders. So got a variable for it here. Today's total equals 0. And down here, what I've done is to the current value, I'm adding the customer total, and I just actually took the code from above here, multiplying it by 1.2 to get that extra 20%. Okay, so that will keep adding up each new customer's total to our daily total here. And again, we've just got to print it out at the end of the line. I've used that \n to get a new line. I've put a $sign in, and then use the plus sign to concatenate or join these two things together. I've got to remember to cast it to a string. The reason being, this is an integer. If I tried to do a plus with a string and an integer, Python will throw up a message like can't work with these, it can't add these two different data types. So let's give that program a quick try. So because I'm hilarious again, here's microphone, and let's try and quickly fill in some values so you can see what's going on. Always going for the cheap option. There we go, so we've got all the way through one loop. We've got that mini summary that we did in the previous video, and it says, do I want to make another order? So yeah, what the heck, let's go for it. Can't type, just in case. Oh, I must have run out of 19-inch monitors. So I'm going to say no at this point, having made, let's say there's just 2 customers coming today. We've got a bit of a quiet day in the shop. Here we go. So number of orders today was 2. Here's that long list on one line. I didn't quite fit in the line, but you can see what's going on. So I sold 1 P3 and 1 P5 and no P7s. And there is our total for today. Okay, so that is a solution to this pre-release. Now don't forget, in the exam you'll be looking at answering questions in pseudocode, so you can't necessarily just look at the Python way of doing things. One last point on that. Python does have some limitations with regard to the IGCSE, so I may well make another video on this, but just one quick point. Python doesn't let you have constants. So a constant is the same idea as a variable, like these guys here, but as the name suggests, a constant is one that doesn't change. The only way we could really do that in Python, just to make something stand out, is perhaps put your variable name in capitals. So in this task, something like that 20% that gets added to the price is a constant. That's something that's not going to change. So what we could do, I'm assuming that meaning that's some kind of tax, so I could put VAT or tax equals 20, and then where was it, down here, I could use that value here rather than times it by 1.2. I could do something similar using a constant. So you've just got to be aware of things like this. We can't do it in Python, but you could well get asked about constants in the exam, and they may expect you to use them in your answers. So anytime there's a value that isn't going to change throughout the whole program, we could use a constant for it.